Tonight we're going to talk about Module 4, Comparative Advantage and Trade. This is really one of these modules or one of these concepts where, listening to it might be a little bit hard to get, but once you start doing it, which we'll do tomorrow in class, you'll see that it starts to make itself clear. Remember, if there's something I say that you're not sure about, please just kind of jot down a question. Make sure to ask me in class tomorrow. You can also go to the folder on Schoology, and Mr. Clifford does a really great job of demonstrating this. Again, you probably don't need to do that yet because I'm going to be doing this tomorrow in class, and we're all going to do it together. I might ask some of you to do it, those of you that understand it. But just kind of keep that in mind as I go through this, because I think it's easier to understand by doing it, and I think it's easier to explain as I do it. But I'm going to give it a shot, and hopefully you're a little bit more clear, and I think you'll at least have enough information to pass the quiz tonight. Okay, so comparative advantage and trade. Okay, so the whole idea behind comparative advantage is that nations are better off, or individuals or whoever, if they can trade, as long as the opportunity cost for producing each good is not identical. Okay, there is a chance for each country to gain for trade. This is going to become real important as we talk and hear the candidates for president talk, because you'll hear some of them say, maybe both of them say, that trade is not a good thing. And there are winners and losers in trade, but overall, almost every economist agrees that trade is beneficial to all parties involved. The costs outweigh the benefits. So think about how we want to think about this. Where were your shirts made? Think about your clothes, your shoes, your backpack. Where was all that stuff made? Think about the food you've eaten today. Okay, where did that come from? Was it grown here? Did you grow it yourself? Was it grown overseas? Why didn't you do all these things on your own? Why isn't, sure none of you answered the question by saying, I made all my clothes, I grew all my food, right? Maybe some people do that. But for the most part, we rely on other people to do things for us, and we, some cases, do other things for them, okay? And so, when you think about your life, right now, you're a student, and that's what you need to concentrate on, and you'll have other people do the things that you're not able to do, whatever that might be, okay? And so this is the whole idea behind the comparative advantage. Some people are good at some things, some people are good at others, and they're going to get together and trade with each other. And so they still have everything that they need. So when talking about, and this is a real important slide, when talking about comparative advantage, there are two ways of looking at the problem. We have output problems and we have input problems. And I'm going to talk to you about what each of these is and then how we go about solving them. So first we'll talk about an output problem. Output problems deal with final goods and services, things that are tangible, things that you can get your hands on. So we're talking about cars, boats, beer, wine, wheat, corn, okay, anything that you can touch, hold, hang on to. Okay, input problems, okay, this is the second type of comparative advantage problem. Input problems deal with what goes into creating the final product, okay? So it might be, it's definitely things that are intangible, but we're talking about how many hours to make a car, how many days to paint a house, how many acres to grow wheat, how many minutes to solder this thing or whatever, okay? These things are intangible, okay, but they still go into making. So these are the two types of problems. How do we go about solving these? Well, there's a couple mnemonic devices, or there's really only one. The other one is sort of the opposite. If it's an output problem, we say that other goes over. An easy way to remember that, output starts with an O, other starts with an O, over starts with an O. And I'll explain to you what I mean when we talk about other and over. And then input problems, okay, is just the opposite. Other, we're still talking about the other one, goes under. Okay? And again, I think this will be a lot easier to understand. I know it will be when you start working it out yourself. But make sure you kind of have this in your notes. And again, please ask questions if you don't understand. So let's take a look at an example from the Krugman book here. We're looking at two castaways, Tom and Hank, and they can do two things: pick coconuts or catch fish. Okay, so we're going to look at what their production possibilities are. Right. So if we're looking at Tom, Tom can either catch 30 coconuts or 40 fish. Right. Well, first thing we want to figure out is, are coconuts and fish, are they tangible? Yes, they are. So we know that this is an output problem. So here's how you want to set it up. You make a little chart like this: Tom, Hank, fish, and coconuts. And with Tom, Tom can catch 40 fish, or he can catch 30 coconuts. Hank, on the other side, can catch 10 fish or 20 coconuts. Okay? So right here, we're just putting what they can do if they concentrated all their resources to one or the other. Okay? Sometimes you'll be asked the absolute advantage. Absolute advantage, while important to know, eventually was determined to be not the significant thing. And that's where we got comparative advantage from. Absolute advantage is simply who can make more. So, who can catch more fish, Tom or Hank? Yes, the answer is Tom. Who can catch more, pick more coconuts? That's also Tom. So Tom has the absolute advantage. It does not mean that Tom should do both, though. Okay, and I'll show you what we mean here in a minute. Okay, so what we want to do, because this is an output problem, we're talking about other goes over. Okay, so if we want to know how many fish, how many coconuts must Tom give up by catching one fish? So we're talking about fish, and we're asking about coconuts. So other goes over. Okay, and so you'll take the 30 over the 40. So one fish equals 3/4 of a coconut. And if we want to know how many fish must Tom give up when he's catching coconuts, we're talking about coconuts. Fish is the other one, 4 over 3. So one coconut equals 4/3 of a fish. Meaning every time Tom picks a coconut, he is not catching 4/3 of a fish. Let's do the same thing with Hank. Okay, other goes over. How many coconuts are given up when Hank catches a fish? Other goes over. One fish equals 2 coconuts. And when you go the other way, 1 coconut equals a half a fish. One thing that all of you should notice here is that each opportunity cost is an inverse of the other one. Okay, so there's a shortcut for you as well. Now, who has the comparative advantage? When looking at the comparative advantage, we're looking at who can do this at a lower opportunity cost. So, for fish, who has the lower opportunity cost for catching fish? Well, 3/4 is less than 2. So Tom has the lower opportunity cost. And who has the lower opportunity cost for picking coconuts? Well, 1/2 is less than 4/3 or 1 1/3. So the answer is Hank. This is another sort of thing that you could recognize is if one person has the comparative advantage in one, automatically the other person has the comparative advantage in the other. Okay, another quick hint for you. Okay, now, what does this tell us? Once we know who has the lower opportunity cost, this tells us who should specialize in each activity. So this tells us that Tom should put all of his resources towards catching fish, and Hank should put all of his time and resources towards picking coconuts, okay? And then, obviously, Hank's going to want some fish, Tom's going to want some coconuts, and so they will trade with each other. And we'll talk later about the terms of trade, okay? So that's the basics for a comparative advantage problem. Again, it might sound confusing. We'll talk about this tomorrow. We will do many examples where I think by the end of this, by working through it, by watching more videos if you need to, you'll grasp this without much of a problem. So, what I want you to do is take a minute and pause the video and just kind of go through this little sheet here, especially if you're not feeling it and not understanding it. And we will go over this first thing tomorrow.